Here.
My name is Ralph White. I am an alcoholic. And I want to thank you, Ali, for asking me to come out. I think this is the best birthday present I could get. Some people would think, wait a minute, it's your birthday. Why are you having me? Today I turned 70 years old, and I get to spend it in one of my favorite places on earth, in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I get to spend it with some people that I enjoy spending it with. Ashley, thank you so much for a wonderful, wonderful talk from the Al-Anon. I don't say the Al-Anon perspective. I don't know what that is. From you, you gave a wonderful talk on our fourth and fifth step. And my brother, Mr. Marinelli, uh, I can think of nobody else I'd rather be sharing this platform with. You know, Peter and I have the same sponsor. Uh, we have shared a lot of the same experiences over the years. I've had an opportunity to be witness of the transformation that's available to anybody in Alcoholics Anonymous. And then I've had the opportunity in this platform, I'm speaking on step 6 and 7. We're entirely ready to have God remove our defects of character, humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. And immediately, some of them started flaring. When you get asked to speak behind the people that just talk, and people talk to me, Ralph, I like the way you, but both of these talks were so enlightening. And Peter, you gave me so much. I love it. When I get to experience another point of view. When we talk all the time, and Leslie talks about a person being a perspective changer, and you did that for me today. I used to be scared, you guys. I better jump right into this deal because we got a long way to go in a short time to get there. And I'm going to try to color between the lines and stay inside the time frame. And that used to not seem to be a problem when you're talking on 6 and 7. When I started going out and got the opportunity to do some talking and in a format that said speak on a specific step, I used to hope, please don't give me 6 and 7. There's only 2 paragraphs dedicated to 67 in our big book, right? And so the inclination is to think that there is not as much importance, plus there's not as much meat. And I think for myself, nothing could be further from the truth. We have 2 paragraphs that specifically speak to 6 and 7, to defects of character. But I think our entire Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and in fact, our entire program goes to step 6 and 7. I don't think there's anything we do that's not designed to address these defects of character, these shortcomings. Sometimes we call them manifestations of self. Sometimes we call, but the place that we really talk about it is in our 3rd step, when we talk about relieve me of the bondage of self. And then we go and later on we call those defects of characters and we call them shortcomings. We also call them resentments, dishonesty, fear, immoral sex conduct. We call them a litany of things throughout our book. We call them the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. We call them agitation. We say pause when you get to that place, Ralph. We call them when you're confused. We call them a lot of things, these defects of character. So throughout the entire literature, we talk about it. And I probably going to follow Pete's lead and not talk so much about the how to. When we get to that 6 and 7 step, originally, I can remember when I was in about my 2nd year of recovery, and the first place somebody tried to share with me a way to address defects of character was this. And I'm not knocking it. It was a really rudimentary, and it had some value. It said, Ralph, God will not create a vacuum. So whatever it is that you see something that you find objectionable, you need to practice its opposite. And so even have index cards. If it's dishonesty, when you get to a place where you're faced with dishonesty, right now I'm going to practice being honest. If I'm faced with lying, practice telling the truth. If I'm faced with lust, practice being faithful. And as if I had the ability to exert my power of will over these defects of character, right? We could have moral and philosophical convictions galore. In fact, we could wish and will these things with all our might. One of the things that I used to hear, and I'm not one that gets a lot in the slogan bashing or bashing what other folks say, because what I've learned is this: there is value pretty much in any effort to get better, whatever that effort is. Sometimes you'll outgrow what it was at a particular time. And so when I outgrow it, now I want to bash the fact that that's where you are, or that there's some value in that for you. And that's not what I intend to mean at all. But there was a time, early on, and looking at these defects of care. I remember people used to say, I heard somebody say it at a meeting the other day, if I knew better, I would have done better. There's value in that. But I knew better than to go in my wife's purse when I was taking that money to go cop. Didn't want to. Knew better. I couldn't do better. The needed power wasn't there. When alcohol called me, I answered the call. When I was supposed to go out and pick up the Pampers, I knew better than to take that money and not come back home that night. But I had the call, money loaded. Got in the car with every intention to go to the store and come back. Couldn't do it. Couldn't pull it off. Needed power wasn't there. In bigger areas too, there were things that I wanted to do. I wanted to be a stand-up guy. I wanted to be a man of integrity. I wanted to be, here's my deal. When want to meets ought to, want to always wins with a guy like Ralph. Want to always wins with a guy like me. So how do we address that? When we get to the 6th and 7th step, I'm going to try to specifically stay there, you guys, but I'm also going to speak to some other stuff that Peter brought up to me. When I listen to Peter, and here's the deal: I suffer from an illness that only a spiritual experience can conquer. We spend a lot of time in our chapter, we agnostics, trying to hammer that thought, that idea home. Just because it's in there doesn't mean I believe it. But I've tried every other remedy to get the gorilla off the block. And when I was not able to successfully working, falling in love, hustling, making more money, physical exercise, tried all these other things. And at the very end of I'm left with this idea that I saw men and women demonstrate in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the only reason I came to that, which is, okay, what about this spiritual experience? So the diagnosis, I accept it. When I take one, I can't stop. When I honestly want to quit on my own, I can't do it. I might be alcoholic. That's the diagnosis. What's the prescription? Spiritual experience. Oh my God. Now that one seemed hard for me. And the medicine, and one of the reasons it seemed hard for me is, one, I don't like the way it looked like the medicine tastes. I haven't taken the medicine. I haven't taken the prescription. I thought I had. I had had a overdose of religious education, but I had never bought in, right? So I had never, so I don't like the way it looked like the medicine tastes. You pious people, you self-righteous people, you people who are members of the church, and my mom is one of those people. But my mom was a shining example. But at the time, I was in Baptist church, and when the Holy Ghost would come through the church and people would jump up, I'd look at my mom out the side and be like, you better not jump up in here and embarrass me, right? I've been selfish and self-centered all my life, right? And so that piece, I don't even like the way, seemed like the people that took the spiritual experience medicine are frowned up and scrunched up and not having fun. I don't want to be. And here's the companion piece to that. Plus, I know I can't take the medicine that's prescribed. Sometimes in Alcoholics Anonymous, well-intentioned, it'll feel like I can't take the medicine as prescribed. I'm going to refer, to asking people. I'm going to refer to people a lot because it's such a great example. I, Pete and I have been doing this walk for a long time, and there are stages of development in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember a stage when it was a way more pious and self. Sometimes I come from an ethic early on. God damn it, do the steps or die. And it can feel like, oh, I know I need this medicine. I can't take it, and I don't want to look like that. I don't want to be like that. And then on the other hand, even when it doesn't look bad, it looks daunting. It looks daunting. Ashley, very well spoken, very much putting it together. Peter, very much. I mean, deep, heavy, insightful. It brought out one of my defects as I was sitting here. One of my defects of character is what I think you think about me. This need to outdo, and the testosterone starts jumping. Wait a minute, this dude, he can't look better than me in front of everybody. And he's my boy, and it brings this out that now I'm required to be as heavy and to be as, and to have something new and, and so uh, that idea in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm a guy that's been on the road for a while, and I've been doing this and incorporating this thing in my life for a while, and so I have some ideas and I have a way of communicating, and I'm cool with that. I'm aware of that. And I don't have a way of living this program any different than anybody else or any better. But I'm okay at communicating with it. What I want to assure anybody that's new that's in the squares, who feels like I gotta be heavy to take this medicine, I gotta be deep, I gotta be able to put it down, I gotta be able to do it every day. My favorite line in the book is, God don't make hard terms with those who seek it. You ain't gotta be deep. You ain't gotta be fly. You ain't gotta be cute. You ain't gotta have money. You ain't gotta be rich. You ain't gotta be well spoken. You just gotta be broken. 6 and 7. It's the portal and it's the gateway. One of the things that we have, and you just got to be broken. And so when we were talking about, Pete started out by saying 2 requirements in that 4th and 5th step. It's 2 requirements to do the rest of what it is we do. Thorough and honest. And thorough and honest is, I can be where I am right now. As thorough as honest as I can be where I am right now. Somebody else might talk about 300 reasons. I can't do that. Okay. Thorough and honest as I can be right now. And so when I come to this 6 and 7, you guys, I come to it coming out of a, 4th and 5th step. And really the pivot point and our starting point are my first surrender is in that first step. And whether or not I verbalize that prayer, whether or not I vocalize it, if I ask, for me, that's a prayer. And I ask, do something with me. I might not even ask it to a formal power. Just help me. Early prayer, first surrender, and I surrender not to the power. I surrender to the fact I'm like this and I'm just going to be this way. I quit quitting, my friend Josie likes to say, and I love that. So that's the first surrender. Then I go in that 3rd step and I say, okay, God, do something with me. I'm just mold me. Pete was sharing about when I now pick up the pen and paper, I'm doing it along with God. But the interesting thing about our program, you guys, there are lots of seeming contradictions. So I'm doing this 4th step, seemingly with God's aid, but I don't know God yet. Remember, I'm blocked. I don't have a relationship. 2nd step is a coming to believe. 10th step is when it talks about, by now I've entered the world of the spirit. So in the 4th step, I ain't even, so Ralph, I gotta have this power. I gotta have No, no, no. And we agnostic, it talked about the moment I say I am now willing to believe, I can commence to get results from this power, even though I don't understand it, even though I don't have to. So when I'm doing what it is that the last 2 speakers talked about, I don't have to have, it don't require that I know God. It requires that I'm seeking. don't require that I know, require that I see. And so I go into that activity and now I do this fourth and fifth and I come out of it. And in my fifth step, I see a lot of stuff that's objectionable about your boy. I've known a lot of it before. I've known some of the things that, are not Webster dictionary terms that you'll use in terms of some of my defects, but I knew I was scandalous. I knew I was trifling. I knew sometimes I knew it was judgmental. Coming out of that fifth step, though, I saw how judgmental I was. I saw how bullying I was. I saw how manipulative I was. One of the things that riddles me, and it talks about, in our book it talks about it, but forget it. My life shows me I'm riddled with fear, man. And fear, these self-centered fears are the chief activator of my defect. The self-centered fears are what brings these on. I'm scared of what I think you think about me. So what do I do in response to that? I lie about who I am. I perpetrate and pretend to be somebody I'm not. I run in circles and I become who I am in that circle because I need you to like me. I'm not a player. I'm not a playboy. I'm the kind of guy. I was tongue-tied around girls. It would always be somebody that was a cool guy. I'm looking at my boy Rodney or somebody, or GQ, and I'd be in the club with him. I don't have game and I don't have hustle. I'm ear hustling Rodney when he's talking to this girl because I don't know how to make a girl giggle, but I want to. So I pretend. I was coming out of a meeting, spiritual meeting at my home group, 9604 South Figueroa at the time. And, we putting it down and everybody is talking so spirit. And I'm in the parking lot with the fellas, you guys. And I want to be, I've always been a square. I've always been a square and I've always been a nerd. I come out of Watts. I'm from a tough town, but I'm not a tough guy. I run with tough guys. And then I'm in the light, and I've always wanted to be. I played ball and the rest. And so I want to be with the big boys, even though I'm not. I talk like I talk. I've always talked the king. But when I get down, I want to be able to talk like this. So I'm at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, trying to get my life on a spiritual basis. I'm about a year and a half sober, and I go to the parking lot. Some of you ladies are going to be shocked by this next revelation. Believe it or not, in the parking lot, coming out of this spiritual meeting, standing with the fellas, some fellas are talking in a way that's not exactly in complimentary terms about you. And it's not aimed at any women in particular, but, it's throwing out some of the terminology that gets thrown around loosely. Rodney, I'm looking at you. I know you've never done it, but I was with some guys. And so the guys are talking, and all of a sudden, to fit in, I'm like, yeah, man, I was talking to this beach, and somebody's head snapped around and looked at me. It didn't even feel right coming out my mouth. That's even before getting sober. I'm not that guy. And it's not out of virtue, but I was raised in such a strict household with my mama. If you said lie, that was considered cussing. We had to say, you telling a story. So I come out, and so for some people, I heard somebody share at a meeting one time, they just could not do right. And so they got to, and for me, I couldn't do wrong. And I so wanted to do something, when I was a kid I just wanted to bust out of this square. I wanted to bust out of this, and so I'm standing with the fellas. But God did for me what I can't do for myself, work through my defects, right? That's why in 7, you guys, when it says, remove from me every single defective character that stands in the way of my usefulness, there's an implication. There's an implication that some of these defects are useful. Well, that night, I hadn't even got to the 6th and 7th step yet, but a guy's head snapped around. When this phrase came out of my mouth, it felt like it rang false. You know how when you're a perpetrator and somebody said, come on, don't even try that. You in a circle with some people, and it rang false. And when I am so keenly aware of how people see me, right? Some overly aware, I see it wrong, but I'm so keenly that when dude's head snapped around, I registered it. And I said, oh, he popped me. He knows that was, and I went home. Again, this defect, I take you guys home and I over evaluate. I'm overly consumed with myself and I'm overly concerned with myself. And that stuck with me for about 3 weeks. all these cats are talking about me. They laughing about the square dude that's trying to be cool. I don't know if you took me home at all, but that had an effect on me. I lay in my bed, I said, I'm gonna be me. Now, just because I claimed that didn't make it so, but it gave me a rallying point. And from that day to this, Ralph is Ralph White. I'm square. I'm who I am. I don't, and part of it, it is a good. I don't come disrespectful, whether you with me or not. Like that's who I am. I'm who I am most of the. And so these defects of character, you guys, um, where do they come from anyway? Why is it so problematic? Why is it that not only is our entire book devoted to it, but Bill said that it's specifically decided, even though everything we talk about is uh, freedom from this bondage of self. That's the entire program. I am going to sit down though and say specifically, Ralph, you need to know that your aim is uh, identify some of these objectionable defects and then come to me. God gave us something he didn't even leave for himself. Very interesting. I was walking to a meeting one day, and a guy, an old timer, saw me, and he's like, "Ralph, what's going on with you?" I'm like, "I'm just doing God's work." He said, "What you think you can do for God, God can't do for himself?" That threw me, right? Because I'm the right answer guy. But I asked the old timer. I said, "John, holler at me. What is it then?" He said, "Ralph, God gave you something he didn't even reserve for himself." Really? God gave me something he doesn't have? I'm interested. He said, "What?" I said, "What's that?" He said, "He gave you the choice over whether or not you're going to return his love." God has no choice. God is love. So it's three things at work, ladies and gentlemen. We know that we talk about in this business a third step and seventh step. We know we talk about this business of self will versus God's will, right? Where does it come from anyway? Well, one of the things that separates us from everything else on this planet is free will. From any of the other animals on the planet, Ralph has free will. And that's a wonderful thing. What comes with that, what comes as a companion piece to that, I think, now we're deep in the Ralph's opinions, right? Which is Ali asked me, so you get them, blame him. We deep in this, Ralph's opinion. I think a companion piece to that automatically is self-will. I need something that individuates me. I need something that distinguishes me, and most people, that's a deal. And I grow up, being an individual, being distinguished from that, colliding with other folk, having the ability to say, "Oh, I am so glad that, unlike dogs in heat that run in the street and they run at the other dog that's in heat, Leslie has the ability to say, Ralph, I like you. There's something about you that's different than Rodney, that's different than Peter, that's different than, Ali, that's different than whatever else it is, and I have the ability to make those choices too. A lot of other stuff comes with that. We call it self-will, and that self-will, is where, it's the source, of our defect. But I think my sponsor, Peter and I have the same sponsor. This defect of character, you guys, what do we know? What entity do we know that is without defects? Most of us would agree we would call that God. To be human is to be defective. My sponsor calls it a design feature. I'm not designed. If I were to right now look at the 269 people squares here and ask people to raise their hand, how many people have ever felt like I'm not enough? How many people have said in their story, "I've always wondered why I don't feel like I'm enough"? And you know what why I think that is, you guys? Because you're not. Because I'm not. I'm not supposed to be. Me in and of myself, I'm not designed to be complete. Me and in and of myself, I'm not designed to be enough for what this life presents. Me and of myself, I'm designed to be connected. I'm designed to be connected to a power. You could have the best lamp in the world, bomb ass lamp. I mean, the hell of a design, all the design people, but it does not fulfill its function if you don't plug it in. Its function, and it lights up and it illuminates once it's plugged in. I light up and I illuminate when I'm plugged in. It's a design feature. And I go to God because of my defects. When you have anything, if you got a car that's got defects, when you get that recall, when you get a recall for all the Mazdas of this year or all the Toyota, all the Lexus of 2008 design, is recall where to manufacture. Why? Because the car don't work on itself. 6 and 7, recall the manufacturer. I don't work on myself. When I look at the third step prayer, I was just talking yesterday. I look at the third step prayer and I look at the seventh step prayer. And for me, those are like a contract. And I say, God, do something with your boy. And he does. And there's a lot in it for me. There's something in it for me. I get a director. I get an employee. I get somebody that if I perform his work well and stay close to him, he does for me what I can't do for myself. I get somebody that takes away these things in me that have been blocking me from you guys. I get a lot out of the deal in the third and in the seventh step. Oh my God, I've now come a little differently than I'm coming in the third step. I'm coming now knowing when you go to a girl or when you want to meet somebody, you put best foot forward. You're not showing the worst of you. You coming with the best of you. Let's go to a good restaurant. Let me put on my best. Let me pick you up and have a car wash. I'm not coming when it's dirty. I'm not coming. And so I'm putting my best. But in the seventh step, you guys, after looking at myself in the fifth step, knowing the warts, seeing all the deficiencies, I still go to God just like this. Take me just like this. When you hear about that, for better or for worse, take me good and bad, what does that remind you of? When we get married, that's what it feels like to me in the seventh step. It feels like entering this relationship and sealing the deal. What's in it for God? Okay, in the third step and in the seventh step, I know what's in it for me. What's in it for God? Why? What's the deal? It takes me back to that God don't make too hard terms with those who seek him. If you knew and you wondering and you thinking about this fourth step feeling daunting, if you're thinking about the 6 and 7 feel, what's in it for God? I think God is thirsty for me. He's thirsty for me. Just because I'm getting ready to go to dinner when I get off here. My daughters are taking me. One of my daughters is over, and my oldest daughter is meeting me with my grandkids. And when I get out to dinner with them, and I'm able to do for them, and freely, just because they want to, just because I'm dad, just because nothing else. I'm thirsty for my kids, just because. I want the best for you. Well, Daddy, I want to. No, you won't. No, not for nothing else. In this contract, in this relationship right here, I used to wonder, how is it that my mom was on welfare and cleaning people's houses and not making no money and going to school and having another job and being PTA president for these 6 boys? Mama, what's in it for you? She didn't go out. My mama didn't party. She wasn't one of them like us. She wasn't a young woman going out partying, doing none of that Ashley was talking about with her. My mama was going, what's in it for you? And now I'm a dad. I know what it is. And imagine, that's when I use that analogy, when it comes to God, I know that it's insufficient. I know that it's insufficient to put it in human terms, but imagine you as a parent, how you feel about it just for no other reason than they're yours. So imagine this power. He's thirsty for me. So in the 6th and 7th step, I get so grateful. I think that's the portal. That's how we plug into this power. If I didn't have defects of character, I wouldn't be going to him, and so he's thirsty for me. And the 6th and 7th step, you guys, the way it gets actuated, it's the same as the 3rd. When it got legs is when I started doing the 4th and 5th step. I get legs. When I do, what do you think is happening when I start embarking on an 8th step and a 9th step? Defects of character, procrastination, defects of character. I'm developing this integrity, defects of character. I'm finding some forgiveness, defects of, when we go in the 10, and when I'm looking at a 10 step, continuing to watch. Oh my God. See, I knew I wouldn't have enough time to talk to you guys because he's thirsty, but I just want to leave you guys with this. You are the best birthday present that a brother can have. I thank you for my life, not only for these 36 plus years, but I made it to 70 with you. And I want to thank you guys for being here for me tonight. My name is Ralph White. I am an alcoholic.
Thank you so much, Jen. I am Nat M, a very grateful member of Al-Anon, and I can totally relate to the character defects that come up with speaking on such a workshop. I've got to say I am truly blessed to be sharing my experience next to these particular message carriers tonight. So thanks for letting me share with everybody. I was planning on just sharing my list of defects, but we don't have 3 hours. We only have 30 minutes. So I'll go a different route with this, I think is the best way to go. But I suffer from the spiritual malady. The difference between me and the alcoholic is that I have about 100 different solutions that I will reach for. And my defects marry up right to that. I have probably more than 100, but we'll say 100 because I feel better about it if I do it that way. So, but it's a disease of self-will. And I think what 6 and 7 are truly showing me is what self-will looks like. What do I do in the face of not getting what I want? And the truth that I discovered through my 4th and 5th step was I'll do a lot in order to get what I want at the end of the day. And unfortunately, I didn't see it well, or maybe fortunately, I'm blessed to see it now this way, but I didn't see it that way before. I'm sure many of you on tonight have heard the Al-Anon favorite words of, I was just trying to help, which is really just a different form of gaslighting because I'm going to make you feel bad for asking me why I'm trying to force you into this situation. And what I come back with, well, I was just trying to be helpful to you. That's just my excuse, right? So seeing how these things kind of crop up for me was enlightening, to say the least. And the long list, I hated at first, but I love it now because this is what I can search for. I would love to sit here and say that after being through the steps a number of times now, that this list has dwindled down to 1 or 2, but it hasn't. The funny thing about the disease is the fact that self will blind me. Self will tell me that I am acting that I'm acting in God's will, but I'm actually acting in self-will. And, Mark H. is a wonderful, wonderful speaker, and he talks about being asleep, dreaming that you're awake. And to me, that is acting in self-will and convincing myself that it is God's will, because it's what I'll do. And then I'm wondering why I'm so miserable. I'm wondering why I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. That's not something that happens, I don't believe, with just alcohol. That is once the alcohol is removed for the alcoholic as well. And for me, it's the same. I will become restless. I will become irritable, and I'm coming after you for that. Every single time I'm coming after you for that. And there's actually there's a comedian who talks about how, psychologists say that there's a dumb part of your brain that just says if you're having a bad day, you just smile and your brain thinks that you're happy. Like, that's how dumb that side of the brain is. And I think that's the side of the brain where, like, I actually sit, because self blinds me all the time with it. I am tricked into thinking that it's God's will when it's not. And that's just what continues to happen for me. To see later. And I don't think that that's by mistake. I do believe there are some scenarios where I've been pretty embarrassed by the things I've done in order to get my way. You know, when we look at step one, my life being unmanageable in comparison to the alcoholic, my life was manageable as hell. It looked so manageable in comparison, right? So it was so hard for me to see that. But the truth is, there are times even today where I feel like I'm almost sicker because I didn't have the excuse of being drunk for this. I did these harms and all these character defects, not only stone cold sober, but on purpose. I did it because I wanted to hurt you. I wanted to bend your way in order to get my way at the end of the day. So I thought the meat of my disease really sat in the fourth and fifth step. And I thought that for a really long time. But what I've come to discover about myself is that the meat of my disease sits in 6 and 7, because this is what shows up when I'm not getting my way. And that's when God is not present. And that's the one thing that I definitely need to remember when I'm going into step 7. But I wanted to kind of describe a little bit of how I got to my amazing list of character defects. I should go for a Guinness Book of World Record on them, but we'll do that later. Will be a different section for program. But the fourth step that I worked, you know, Al-Anon has Paths to Recovery, and there's Blueprint for Progress or something along those lines. And I haven't used those tools to work through my fourth. I was taken through the big book and used the 4 columns. But when I got to the 7 sides of self, I was taken through a very in-depth process of truly looking at what that means. So when I got to looking at self-esteem, you know, I have a resentment against my employer, and there's a colleague of mine that always speaks down to me. And this is the resentment I'm looking at. And I'm saying, yes, it affects my self-esteem. And that's what I think about me. So I had to share with my sponsor, you know, what do I think about myself in this scenario? So when I'm being told or talked down to, which is probably just my perspective, I imagine, I think to myself, you know, I'm intelligent, I'm really smart, and I'm really deserving of respect because I don't like what this person is doing. I don't like how they're saying it. And so what I need to do is look at the character defect that stems from that. Because when my character feels attacked, I'm going to do something to change it. I'm going to do something to change it every time. And a lot of times, you know, I'd say, oh, well, I'm selfish. Yes, but how? How am I selfish? You know, oh, well, you manipulate. Well, how? How do I manipulate? Like, what does that truly look like? Because self is really sneaky and will continue to kind of change how these things manifest, how this shows up. So with this particular colleague, you know, let's say that we have a report that comes out and I provide a date in this spreadsheet that I send to him every week. And we got a new date the day before that I know for damn sure he has not looked at yet. And because he's made me feel unintelligent or less than, we go into a meeting with the rest of our colleagues. And instead of going ahead and telling him that we got this email, I updated the spreadsheet and he should look at it because his report's going to be wrong, I let him say it wrong on his own. And then I come back right behind there and say, no, the report that you didn't look at that I fixed up, it had the new dates on it. It's actually X, Y, and Z. So what I've now done is effectively put myself right back up on the top of this totem pole and made sure that you and everybody else around us knows that I am intelligent and I do a good job and I'm a great employee, because that's what I'm trying to show. And I will continue to sabotage and try to do something to make you look worse than me, you know? And this stems to so many more character defects, right? I can be a chameleon. I'll change and do whatever I need to in order to get you to like me, which, truth be told, probably by the end of this talk, nobody's going to like me because I'm just telling you about my defects, but that's okay. Hopefully somebody gets something out of the talk, you know, but I'm going to do everything that I can to get external validation. You know, I need you to tell me what I'm worth today because that's how my disease shows up. I need you to put me up on this pedestal. And then, we look at pride, and that's how others look at me, or I believe I'm being perceived by other people. And if we stay on this line of intelligence, others should know that I'm smart. Others should know that I'm a good employee, and that turns into, well, what am I going to do to make sure that they know that? Has anybody lied on a resume, in an interview? Like, oh, nobody's going to check up on this because I need to look better than. I will continue to make everything into a contest. Everything is a contest for me because I can't see it any other way, and another defect that comes into play with that is I am not unable, but unwilling to see others as equal to me. And that goes into my relationships, right? When you marry or you're in a relationship with somebody, you have a partner, and partner to me typically means equal parties. But that's not the truth. I would sit here and tell my sponsor that there is financial autonomy across my household. So tell me why my husband never knows exactly how much money is in my account. And luckily we've had a lot of things occur that have changed things for the better. And hopefully I'll have time to get to that in a little bit, but it's a straight up lie. There's not financial autonomy in this house. How could I say that with the things that I've been doing? And it's not that I'm hiding money or I'm spending things that he doesn't know about. He sees the Amazon packages. I know that for sure, but he doesn't know how much they were. I'm not sharing that kind of information, and that's not right. It's not fair, but that's how my defects show up. I put so much worth in what I have, what I look like, what you think of me. That is where my worth sits. And as long as I am sitting in self-will, it will continue to sit there. There are so many different ways that I'm going to try to change your mind about me. When I talked about being a chameleon before, that goes to, friends even. And matching it up with lies. Have you ever been in a conversation where somebody says, "Oh, have you seen such and such movie?" And you go, Yeah. I haven't seen that movie. I haven't seen that movie once. Don't even know who's in it. So why did I say it? And it's just because I want to know everything. I want you to think that I've seen everything, that I've done everything. Like, again, it's this totem pole kind of thing. It's still this contest of above or below. I was talking to my sponsor a little while back, and it's like this light bulb went off. And one of my defects of character is being judgmental. And I said, I think the reason I have such a fear of being judged poorly is because I'm so judgmental of others. And she goes, "You think?" maybe just a tad. But in reality, everybody is really just thinking about themselves. But I have to point out in my mind every flaw that you have just so I can feel better at the end of the day. And we talk about manipulation coming in many different forms. And this is probably one of my favorite stories to tell with this, because this is the sneaky way that it comes into play for me, and why it's so important to understand how this manifests in my life, because I wouldn't see it if I hadn't gone through this work. I wouldn't see it if I didn't have the opportunity in a nightly inventory to look at it. So husband loads the dishwasher. And if you're me, there is very much so a right and a wrong way to load a dishwasher. That's probably any Al-Anon. Who am I kidding? So instead of wanting to be this jerk that goes through, like I've always done, and reload the top rack of that dishwasher, I say, babe, there's those little red things on the top rack? They're bottle jets. Did you know that this dishwasher had bottle jets in it? Those Yeti cups could sit over them, and they clean them so well. Like, it's pretty cool, right? Did I tell him that because I thought he didn't know that there were bottle jets in the dishwasher? No. I told him that in hopes that he would move the Yeti cups to the bottle jets. Like, that is how deep this goes. It's the smallest thing, but if I'm not looking for that, it will escape. It will escape. And if I'm becoming entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, I kind of need to get to a place not only that I see it, but that I see that it's objectionable to me. What am I doing in these scenarios? Am I being an honest person? Am I showing up in the principles of the program when I'm doing this? And the answer is no, I'm not. And that's not who I want to be. I have to have that awareness. I have to practice the humility to be able to see that, because I won't see it otherwise. And I think it's this deflation of ego process that we have to go through. I have to continue to do that. I have to continue to break it down so I can see it, because I will develop a different way to get what I want. And then I'll be asleep dreaming that I'm awake again and again and again. And I don't want to be there, because I know that's where misery sits. Without a doubt, I know that's where misery sits, and I kind of have a choice. I thought it was all about knowledge, right? Knowledge was power to me, but this program has to be experienced. Step 12 talks about having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. It's not because I went through and memorized all the literature. It's because I actually experienced what happens when my character defects win. I experienced what happens when I actually unload and become totally free of everything that I've kept to myself in the fourth and fifth step. I have to experience it. Kurt Z is another really great speaker, and he talks about a rose and the experience of smelling a rose. And he said, I can tell you what a rose smells like. I can describe all of it to you, but you will not truly know what a rose smells like until you smell one. And that to me is what this program is about. Until I experience God, I'm not going to know God. When it talks about a God of our understanding, I don't understand God if I don't experience it, right? It's no longer a God of my understanding. It's still a conception of God and whatever that looks like. And we have two choices. In my experience, we have two choices with the 12 steps, and that's in step 3 and step 7. So step 3, I can make this decision to turn my will and my life over to God. And I do that by going directly into step 4. The second time I get to make a choice is when I have this awareness around my character defects. When I take step 7, I take on the responsibility to do it differently, to do things differently. That is the responsibility that I am accepting when I take step 7. So I have to make a decision. Now that I have knowledge and awareness around, what these character defects look like, I have to continue to watch for them. And when they do crop up and when they do happen, I just need a split second of a pause is all I need at that point in time. And I have to decide if I'm going to continue to go ahead and act in self-will and continue with whatever this character defect is, or am I going to seek God? Because if I seek God with true humility, I can show up differently. And my defects do not have to be objectionable to me in order to do that. I always thought they had to become objectionable in order for me to humbly ask God to remove my shortcomings, but that's not true in my experience. Another conversation I was having with my sponsor, and I kept saying, why is this not objectionable to me yet? Like being a chameleon, for example, it still really benefits me if I get to be a chameleon around all of these people at work. I get promotions. I'm up on this throne. Everything is great. Why would I want to change that? It hasn't hurt many people, right? That's the justification that I give myself. Why isn't this objectionable to me? And I don't have to wait for that moment in order to show up differently, because what I've learned is if I am truly practicing this program, then I'm going to show up differently anyway. It means doing the right thing even when I don't want to, because I don't ever really want to. That's the point. That is what my disease will continue to tell me time and time and time again. And it's doing the right thing anyway. There's the definition of humility in the AA 12 and 12 is to seek and do God's will. And I continue to ask myself, well, how do I do that? How do I seek God's will? What does that look like for me? And a good place to start is the principles of the program. Because I know if I'm showing up in the principles of the program, I am still in the present. I am still very much so living in the present. If I'm sitting in my fear and resentment, I'm sitting either in the past or the future. I can only be in the present if I'm trying to practice these principles. You know, the fear of not getting something that I want or losing something that I have, or a resentment that I think something is going to happen or something that's already happened. You know, it's either a narrative about something that occurred previously or a narrative that I think is about to happen, a hypothetical question, you know. But if I am sitting in the present with kindness, love, tolerance, compassion, integrity, honesty, that is the acceptance of reality for me. Because if I do have true faith, it means that no matter what happens, no matter what I think is going to happen or what does happen, I am okay and I will be okay, even if it doesn't feel okay. Because that's what faith looks like to me. 100% of the time, that's what faith looks like to me. And if I'm going to seek God's will, I have to make these decisions, and I have to continue to see where these character defects are continuing to come up in my life. You know, how many of you have ever used your kids as a weapon? You know, with parents or grandparents or your partner. I had an experience with again with my sponsor, and she called me a sexual predator, and I went, okay, hold up. No, ma'am, we're not going there, but it's true. Have you ever used sex to get what you want? Have you ever used your sexuality to get what you want? I have. That's a defect. For sure. You know, how many of you keep scores in relationships? Every relationship, either romantic or otherwise, is transactional. I'll do this if you do this. Well, if you do this for me, then it means I owe you. Time and time and time again. And as you've heard me talk about for the entire time so far, self-righteous, is most definitely one of my character defects. You know, I'm indignant as all get out. This is how my disease shows up. I'm going to teach you a lesson. I'm going to force you to make me feel okay. We are all just trying to get back to a place of comfort, because I am not okay with the uncomfortable. I am not okay with the discomfort. I am not okay with not knowing. But if I am seeking God and I am with God, I can sit in the discomfort. I can sit in that discomfort because I know at the end of the day, I'm going to be all right. I'm going to be okay at the end of the day. And this looks like, instead of seeking what I can get out of everything, which is really what my disease does and what all of these defects do, I need to be seeking who I'm supposed to be. Like, how am I supposed to show up? And if I'm seeking that instead, I have a hell of a better chance showing up the way that God would have me show up. And what happens if I'm wrong? I'll find out. You know, I'll find out. I've done much worse things, that's for sure. You see it all through my fourth step and in steps 8 and 9, time and time and time again. You know, I'm controlling of everything. I use logic to argue my point. I have a friend who studied the Bible just to argue with people. And, you know, I find myself doing things just like that. Just because I want you to see me a certain way. Because again, my worth sits in just that, exactly how you view me. You know, you look at that fear of poor judgment. What do I do in the face of that? I was taught a fear ladder. And any fear that I have, there is a delusion associated with it, a thought associated with it, and an action. My fear causes the delusion, which causes the thought, which causes the action. Anything that's sitting in that action is 100% my defects of character showing up every time. But there's a thought before that. And I also have a delusion before that. And if I can trace this down to this fear, I guarantee you I'll be able to find 5 or 6 more character defects that come out of it. You know, my fear of losing control. I'll give you a prime example. When I was living in the midst of active alcoholism, I had a fear of losing control. My delusion was that I have to do something to fix it, that it's my job to fix it for somebody else or change what they're doing. So my thought was, well, I'll show you. And my action was bruising my hand on my husband's face, to which the response I got from my sponsor was, you're abusive. And I had to write that down on my defects, and it was true. I would have never labeled myself that way, much like I wouldn't have labeled myself as a sexual predator, but it is the truth. And if I'm having true humility looking at this, I have to be willing to see that. Thank you so much. I have to be willing to see that. I'm not going to like everything that I hear, but I don't have to accept reality for it to be reality, you know? That's part of my problem to begin with, is the fact that I don't like reality and I don't accept reality as it is. If I did, I wouldn't be as sick as I am today, you know? But I love 6 and 7. I don't like what it says about me. And I'll be worried about your opinions of me forevermore. I'm joking. My sponsor would kill me, but I really, really appreciate getting to share some of my experience. And I'll leave you with the 7-step prayer. You know, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. Step 3 talks about handing over myself to the care of God, and it is continued in step 7 with that. Take every ounce of me, good, bad, whatever, and tell me what's useful. Show me what's useful. And how can I show up that way? And I'll start with the principles of the program. I'll continue with doing the work that's outlined in our literature, and still use the guide of the spiritual giants that I've been privileged to listen to and watch go through this. And hopefully I can carry that message to my sponsees and anybody else that I encounter on this road to recovery. So thank you so much. I appreciate everybody's time tonight.